What happens when one of Hollywood's most poised, respected stars suddenly decides she's had enough? When grace meets fire, and a morning talk show becomes the stage for something no one saw coming. That's exactly what unfolded when Gal Gadot, the woman the world knows as Wonder Woman, walked onto The View. And what started as a friendly interview quickly spiraled into a confrontation that left the audience in stunned silence. Now, let's go inside the room. The show had begun like any other episode. The audience was bright, energetic, clapping, cheering, the sound of coffee mugs hitting glass tables. Whoopi smiled, the lights glowed warmly, and the camera rolled across the panel. Joy Behar, Sunny Hostin, Alyssa Farah Griffin. All set for what they thought would be another charming celebrity chat. Then Gal Gadot appeared. Calm. Regal. A quiet storm in a white silk blouse and dark trousers. Her smile was polite but distant, her posture perfect, her eyes sharp, focused. The applause was thunderous. The audience adored her. The global superstar, the advocate for peace and equality, the actress who had become a symbol of empowerment. But even from the start, there was something in her eyes, something that hinted she wasn't just there to promote a movie. Welcome, Gal, Whoopi said warmly. We're so happy to have you back. Thank you, Gal replied, her accent soft but firm. It's always interesting to be here. The audience chuckled lightly. But the word interesting carried weight, a subtle shift in tone that only a few noticed. Sunny Hostin leaned forward. Gal, you've been very vocal about global issues lately, especially on social media. Some people have praised your courage, others think celebrities should stay out of politics. Do you ever worry that your opinions might alienate your fans? The air in the studio cooled. A faint murmur rippled through the audience. Gal's gaze didn't move from Sunny's face. I think staying silent in the face of suffering is far more dangerous than speaking out, she said softly. If using my voice to support peace makes some people uncomfortable, then maybe we need to ask why that discomfort exists. Sunny nodded, but her smile was tight, the kind that hides tension. That's fair, she said. But some critics say your posts have been one-sided, especially regarding the recent conflict. They say, Gal interrupted, something she rarely did. With respect, Sunny, she said, her tone suddenly edged. When people are dying, it's not about sides. It's about humanity. The audience clapped, unsure if it was safe to cheer. Whoopi's eyes flicked between them, sensing the electricity rising. Sunny adjusted her papers, leaning back in her chair. I understand your point, she said. But as journalists, as public figures, we have to look at context. Some of your statements have been criticized as lacking that balance. You understand that, right? Gal exhaled, slow, deliberate. The camera zoomed slightly, capturing her expression, calm, but the kind of calm that precedes a storm. I understand, Gal said finally, that when a woman speaks with passion, she's called emotional. When a man does it, he's called brave. Maybe that's the imbalance we should talk about. The crowd erupted, cheers, applause, a few gasps. Joy Behar let out a nervous laugh. Ooh, it's getting spicy. Sunny smiled, but her eyes didn't. So you're saying the criticism is gender-based? I'm saying, Gal replied, that truth should never depend on who's comfortable hearing it. A silence followed, heavy like the moment before thunder. Whoopi tried to lighten the air. Let's not turn this table into a battleground, ladies, she joked. We just got new mugs. Laughter broke out, but it didn't reach Gal. Her focus was locked. Sunny tilted her head. You've played strong women your whole career, Gal. Wonder Woman, Cleopatra. Women who fight for what they believe in. But in real life, do you ever think there's a line between strength and self-righteousness? The room froze. Joy shifted uneasily. Alyssa's eyebrows lifted slightly. Even the cameraman hesitated before zooming in. Gal's lips parted, but for a moment she didn't speak. Her fingers laced together on the table, knuckles pale. When people question your motives instead of your message, she said finally, it says more about their intentions than yours. Her words cut through the studio air like a blade. Sunny didn't back down. So you don't think you could be wrong? Not even a little. Gal's eyes darkened. I think being human means I can be wrong, she said. But not about compassion. Never about that. The audience applauded again, this time louder, more certain. Whoopi intervened, sensing the rising tide. Let's take a breath, everyone. We'll be right back after this short break. But the camera didn't cut soon enough. Before the red light went off, viewers saw Gal lean closer to Sunny, her voice low, controlled, but trembling with something unspoken. You know, Sunny, she said quietly. Sometimes asking questions isn't about finding truth. Sometimes it's about protecting your own narrative. Sunny blinked, taken aback. Excuse me? The red recording light faded, but the tension did not. The audience whispered, craning to catch every flicker of expression as music swelled and the show cut to commercials. Backstage crew members moved quickly, whispering into headsets. Whoopi leaned back in her chair, muttering something under her breath. Joy sipped her coffee, wide-eyed. Gal sat still, serene, unshaken. Her hands rested on the table like she'd just dropped a sword she no longer needed to wield. When the lights dimmed for the break, a stagehand whispered to the producers, "We need to check the footage. She didn't come here to play." But they all knew. No one was ready for what would happen when the cameras came back on. The show continues as the confrontation deepens. When the line between professionalism and personal belief is crossed on live television, and both women push further than anyone expected. When the cameras came back from the commercial break, the energy in the studio had changed. The laughter was thinner, the applause less certain. Everyone, from the crew to the audience, felt it. That invisible shift that happens when something real, something raw, is about to surface. The theme music faded. The red light blinked on. And there they were again, the hosts of The View and Gal Gadot, sitting in a circle of polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Whoopi tried to reset the tone. "We're back with Gal Gadot talking about her work, her activism, and her new film," she said with that practiced ease only a seasoned host could manage. "Now, Gal, you've always been outspoken about peace and unity, and you've faced your share of criticism for that. How do you deal with that kind of pressure?" Gal's smile was subtle, practiced. "I remind myself that pressure is a privilege. It means people are listening, even when they disagree." The audience clapped, relieved to hear her tone softening. But Sunny wasn't done. "Well," Sunny began, "since you brought up disagreement, I think it's important to ask about the way your recent post was received globally. There were protests in a few places, people saying your words were tone-deaf, that they ignored the suffering on the other side. How do you respond to that kind of backlash?" The question hung in the air, too sharp to ignore. Joy Behar shifted in her seat, muttering under her breath. "Here we go again." Gal turned to Sunny, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You're referring to my post calling for compassion for all victims?" "Yes," Sunny said, nodding. "But some people felt it lacked balance, that it favored one narrative over another." Gal's voice lowered, measured. "Sunny, I think when people are in pain, looking for balance feels like asking someone to measure grief. There's no scale for that." There was a pause. The studio was so quiet, you could hear the hum of the stage lights. Sunny leaned forward. "I understand empathy, Gal. But as someone with a platform that reaches millions, words carry weight. Don't you think it's fair that people hold you accountable for the impact your words have?" Gal tilted her head, her tone calm but edged with defiance. "Accountability is fair, yes. But selective outrage isn't. People pick and choose when to be offended. That's not justice, that's noise." A collective "oh" rippled through the crowd. Joy tried to interject, chuckling nervously. "Maybe we should all have a cup of tea and breathe a little before this turns into the fight instead of the view." The audience laughed, but the tension didn't fade. Sunny's eyes hardened. "Gal, you're clearly passionate. But passion doesn't excuse ignorance. Sometimes good intentions still cause harm." That landed like a slap. The audience gasped audibly. Whoopi's eyes widened. "Sunny." But Gal didn't flinch. Instead, she sat back in her chair, took a slow breath, and met Sunny's gaze directly. "I don't think compassion is ignorant," she said softly. "And if caring about innocent lives offends people, then maybe we've forgotten what compassion even means." Her voice trembled, not from weakness, but from conviction. The audience erupted into applause. Some even stood. The camera captured faces, some cheering, others tense, conflicted. Sunny waited for the clapping to die down. "It's not about compassion, Gal," she said. "It's about responsibility. You're not just a private citizen. You're a global figure. What you say shapes narratives, especially in times of crisis." Gal leaned forward now. The warmth was gone. Her tone dropped an octave, calm, dangerous. "You're right, Sunny. My words matter, which is why I choose them carefully. But maybe the media should ask itself the same question. How responsibly it shapes narratives." A murmur spread through the audience. Even Alyssa looked rattled. Sunny blinked, caught off guard. "So you're blaming the media?" "I'm saying," Gal replied, her accent sharpening slightly, "that truth gets lost when stories become weapons. And too often, People in your position decide who the villain is before asking what really happened. Whoopi's hand went up, a signal for calm. Okay, let's take a breath, she said. I think both of you are making powerful points, but let's remember, this isn't a courtroom. Joy Behar laughed awkwardly. Yeah, I didn't bring my gavel today. Gal offered a faint smile, but her eyes didn't soften. Sunny crossed her arms. You're very good at turning things around, Gal. But we're journalists. It's our job to ask hard questions. And it's mine, Gal shot back, to answer them honestly. Even when honesty isn't comfortable. That silenced the table. Whoopi rubbed her forehead. Well, this is why we love The View. You never know when it's going to turn into a therapy session for America. The crowd laughed again, but uneasily. They could feel it. The crackle of tension that wasn't just about politics or interviews. It was personal now. Sunny pressed once more. Then tell me this, Gal. If you could go back and change your post, would you? Would you reword it? Would you handle it differently? Gal looked straight into the camera, not at Sunny, not at Whoopi, but at the viewers watching from home. No, she said quietly, because truth doesn't change just because people shout louder. The audience went wild, standing applause, whistles, cheers. Even Whoopi looked impressed, tapping her pen against the desk. Sunny forced a polite smile, but her jaw tightened. That's your truth, she said. Not everyone shares it. Gal turned her gaze back to Sunny. Then maybe it's time they start asking why. And with that, the camera zoomed out, the audience clapping, the music swelling to break the moment. But as the producers waved to cut to the next segment, Sunny leaned in slightly, her mic still hot enough to catch a faint whisper. You really think you're untouchable, don't you? She murmured. Gal didn't even look at her. No, she said. Just unafraid. The segment faded to commercial, but in the control room, the producers were already arguing about whether to cut that part out before airing. Outside, the audience buzzed, some thrilled, others unsettled. Everyone knew they had just seen something that would trend within the hour. And when the show returned from break, the sparks that had been building would finally ignite. Because in the next segment, Gal Gadot wasn't the one on the defensive anymore. She was ready to take the gloves off. The tension couldn't be disguised anymore. The audience could feel it before the music even faded. The women at the table were smiling, yes, but the smiles were masks now, cracked porcelain over a live wire of conflict. The producers knew it. The hosts knew it. And Gal Gadot, she was done pretending. The applause sign blinked. The crowd clapped dutifully. Whoopi leaned forward, voice steady. We're back with Gal Gadot, she said, trying to keep things smooth. We've been having a passionate discussion about speaking up and the weight of influence. Joy Behar chuckled lightly. Yeah, passionate's one word for it, she said. My heart rate hasn't been this high since the midterms. A ripple of laughter. A brief exhale of relief. But Sunny Hostin wasn't laughing. She leaned in, resting her chin on her hand, eyes locked on Gal. You know, Gal, she began, you've talked a lot about compassion, about peace. But some would say you use that language as a shield. That when people criticize your stance, you hide behind empathy instead of addressing real issues. The audience reacted audibly, a low wave of murmurs, gasps, a few scattered wows. Whoopi's hand twitched, ready to jump in, but Gal spoke first. I don't hide behind anything, she said. Her tone was calm, but the steel in her voice cut through the room. Empathy isn't a shield, it's a mirror. And when people look at it and don't like what they see, that's not my reflection. It's theirs. Applause. Applause that grew, loud and rhythmic. Sunny smiled tightly. It's a beautiful line, Gal, she said, her tone half sarcastic, half measured. But this isn't a movie. We're talking about real pain, real lives. Don't you think words like that can sound dismissive? Gal turned her body towards Sunny fully now. She was done playing nice. Do you think I don't know real pain, Sunny? She said. You think I've never seen loss or fear or grief. You think because I'm an actress, I live in a fantasy world. The crowd fell completely silent. Sunny blinked. That's not what But Gal didn't stop. I've seen what happens when people lose everything. I've served in uniform. I've seen conflict. You talk about real lives? I've held those lives in my hands. It wasn't anger in her voice. It was conviction, raw, trembling, grounded in something deeper than the cameras could catch. The studio froze. Even Whoopi lowered her eyes for a moment. Sunny exhaled, trying to recover. I respect your service, Gal. Truly. But that doesn't mean your perspective is universal. Of course it isn't, Gal replied. But neither is yours. The difference is, I don't pretend to speak for everyone. A sharp hush swept through the audience. Joy muttered, "Oh boy," under her breath. Alyssa Farah Griffin tried to step in, her voice calm. "Maybe there's a way to bridge this," she said softly. "You're both speaking from passion, and maybe—" But Sunny cut her off. "No, Alyssa, this isn't about passion. It's about accountability. If we sit here and let every celebrity frame conflict through emotion instead of fact, we're doing a disservice to the people who actually suffer." Gal's jaw clenched. She leaned slightly forward, her accent tightening every word. "Sometimes facts are used to erase feelings, Sunny. To make people forget the human cost behind statistics. Maybe that's the real disservice." The crowd applauded again, longer this time, divided but moved. Whoopi raised her hand. "Ladies, we're not going to solve world peace on this table," she said. "Let's keep the train on the track before we derail the whole show." Joy tried to defuse the moment. "Yeah, I don't want to end up in the next trending argument reel," she joked, waving her mug. "Though let's be honest, we probably already are." The audience laughed, but even that laughter felt nervous. Everyone knew they were watching a moment that would go viral before the end of the day. Sunny, still holding her ground, spoke again. "Look, Gal, you're clearly a strong woman. We all admire that. But strength without self-reflection becomes arrogance." Gasps. The air seemed to thicken. Gal blinked slowly, as if deciding whether to let it slide. Then she smiled, faintly dangerously. "And self-righteousness without compassion becomes cruelty." The crowd exploded. The noise was deafening, cheers, whistles, even a few people standing. Whoopi rubbed her temples, muttering, "Lord have mercy." Sunny sat back, crossing her arms. "So that's what this is about, me being cruel?" "No," Gal said, her voice steady. "It's about what happens when we confuse questioning with empathy. You can question people's choices all day, but when you question their heart, you lose the conversation." That line landed like a gavel. Even Joy's usual quips failed her. For a few seconds, it was just silence, thick, humming silence. Whoopi finally spoke. "Okay, I think we need to take another break before this table spontaneously combusts," she said, forcing a grin. "Stay with us, folks. We'll be right back." But once again, the cameras lingered too long. Gal leaned back, sipping her water, eyes fixed on the table. Sunny was staring straight ahead, jaw tight, visibly trying to maintain composure. Then quietly, Gal spoke again, her mic still faintly live. "You know, Sunny, I came here to talk about a film. But maybe the real story today is what happens when people forget how to listen." Sunny turned her head slightly, whispering, "I'm listening. You just don't like the questions." "And you," Gal replied softly, "don't like the answers." The sound techs in the booth looked at each other in shock. The mics were still on, broadcasting every word. The director's voice came through the headset. "Cut the feed. Cut it now. Blackout. Commercial." The audience buzzed, whispering, exchanging glances. Whoopi muttered something to a producer off camera. "We need to get control of this before it turns into something ugly." But it already had. Online, clips were already surfacing. Audience members had filmed on their phones, catching moments the broadcast missed. Within minutes, hashtags began to appear. Hashtag Gal vs. Sunny, hashtag The View Explosion, hashtag Wonder Woman Speaks. Back on set, before the final segment, Whoopi leaned toward Gal. "You sure you want to continue? We can wrap it." Gal smiled calmly. "No," she said. "We'll finish it." Sunny looked up, expression unreadable. "So will I." The floor manager signaled. 30 seconds. Everyone straightened their posture. The audience hushed. The red light blinked on again. And as the camera framed them for the final segment, there was no mistaking it. The next few minutes wouldn't just be television. They would be history. When the show returned, the tension in the air was so heavy it almost hummed through the speakers. The women sat in a line of forced smiles and folded hands, but the energy was different now, charged, unpredictable, raw. The studio lights felt hotter, the silence sharper. Whoopi's voice cut through like a lifeline. "We're back," she said, steady, almost maternal. "It's been quite the conversation today with Gal Gadot, and before we wrap, I want to make sure everyone gets a chance to end on a good note." Her eyes darted subtly between Sunny and Gal, a silent plea. "Please, let's land this softly." Gal nodded, a polite smile touching her lips. "I think good conversations are supposed to make us uncomfortable," she said. "If we only talk when we agree, we're not really listening. We're just waiting to speak." It was calm, thoughtful, the kind of line that might have diffused the situation. But Sunny Hostin wasn't ready to let it go. "Sure," Sunny said evenly. But sometimes when people talk about being uncomfortable, they're really just uncomfortable being challenged. A few people in the audience gasped, small but sharp. Gal's gaze turned toward Sunny, steady, unflinching. And sometimes, she replied softly, people confuse challenging others with trying to win. The audience murmured, a ripple of uneasy energy moving through the room. Whoopi raised her hand. All right. Before this turns into a cage match, let's remember why Gal's here. You've got a movie coming out. Tell us a little about that. Gal inhaled slowly, letting the shift happen. It's a film about courage, she said. About people trying to do what's right when everyone's telling them to stay quiet. Her eyes flicked, just for a moment, toward Sunny. The implication wasn't missed. The audience clapped, some nervously, some with conviction. The applause hung in the air like a verdict. Joy tried to step in with a joke. Well, I think we've proven that courage isn't in short supply at this table, she said, forcing a laugh. But it didn't land. The show ended with the usual music, the wave to the cameras, the host's smiles that looked a little too tight, and the faint echo of an audience that didn't quite know what they'd just witnessed. As soon as the lights dimmed, Gal stood. A producer approached, trying to usher her off stage. Sunny remained seated, watching her. Gal turned briefly, meeting her eyes. For a second, the room felt frozen. No cameras, no crowd, just two women who refused to yield. Then Gal said quietly, "You fight hard, Sunny. I respect that. But sometimes fighting isn't about being right, it's about being human." Sunny blinked, caught off guard. "And sometimes being human means being wrong," she replied. Gal smiled faintly. "Then I guess we both learned something." And with that, she walked off the set. The producers swarmed. Whoopi exhaled hard, muttering, "We'll be trending in 10 minutes. She wasn't wrong. By the time the credits finished rolling, social media had already exploded. Clips flooded TikTok and Twitter, edited, captioned, debated. One video showed Gal saying, "Empathy isn't a shield, it's a mirror." Another captured her final exchange with Sunny. "You don't like the answers." Headlines started rolling in. Gal Gadot faces off with Sunny Hostin. The View turns volatile. Wonder Woman versus The View. Gal Gadot's emotional defense sparks debate. Did Sunny go too far? Fans divided after fiery interview. Comment sections became battlegrounds. Some called Sunny brave for holding a celebrity accountable. Others accused her of disrespecting a guest. Gal's supporters flooded her social pages with praise. "You handled that with grace. Powerful and classy." Sunny crossed the line. Even late-night hosts chimed in. A clip from one show opened with, "When the View turns into the duel, you know it's been a good morning." But beyond the noise, something lingered. The clip of Gal's calm, steady voice. "If we only talk when we agree, we're not really listening," began spreading far beyond gossip sites. It became a quote post, a meme, a message. Inside the View's studio, the next morning was chaos. Meetings, statements, PR control, producers replaying the footage, deciding what to cut for reruns. Sunny arrived first, coffee in hand, her demeanor professional, unreadable. Whoopi followed, giving her a quiet nod. "You all right?" Sunny sighed. "I did my job," she said simply. Whoopi nodded. And she did hers. That's what made it good TV, and a dangerous moment. A few hours later, Gal's rep released a statement. It read, "Gal believes in open dialogue, even when it's difficult. Yesterday's exchange wasn't about conflict, but about conviction." That line set the internet ablaze all over again. By evening, The View's YouTube channel had uploaded the full segment. Within 2 hours, it hit over 2 million views. The comment section was split down the middle, half cheering Gal's composure, half defending Sunny's persistence. One top comment read, "This wasn't a fight. It was a mirror, and everyone saw something different in it." And that, in a way, became the legacy of the moment. Gal Gadot hadn't stormed out. She hadn't screamed. She'd simply stood her ground in the most graceful way possible, and left the world arguing about what strength and empathy truly mean. As the final clips replayed across news segments that night, the camera caught one haunting image. Gal walking off stage, her silhouette outlined in studio light, head held high, eyes steady. That image became iconic. Shared, reposted, immortalized. A quiet confrontation that said more than any shouting match could. And as the voiceover fades, the narrator, "You," draws the viewer in one last time. What did you think? Was Gal Gadot out of line, or was Sunny Hostin pushing too hard? Tell us in the comments below. Your opinion matters. And if you love stories that take you inside Hollywood's most intense and revealing moments, make sure you subscribe to Prime Narrator, where truth and drama meet in the spotlight. The screen fades to black, the applause echoes, and the world keeps talking.